Hello and welcome to the Man of God podcast. My name is Casey Wilson and we have Travis Shook, Justin Bohner, and Cliff Graham with us today. Good morning, gents.
Morning.
Well, today's it's a special episode. Cliff is with us all week because he is actually in the midst of recording a brand new podcast that we're producing. It's called the Line of War podcast. And this has really been, it was a desire of ours for the last 6 months. We've been sitting around the table. We were making logos for the Line of War podcast before we even pitched the idea to Cliff to start a podcast.
Preemptive.
Yeah, I think we all knew it was something that had to be done, right?
I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Yeah.
And
We know what we're doing.
and so a lot of that was we're in the middle of producing the Line of War series. It's been a life project for you for something for the last 20 years, something that you're probably most known for, the Line of War series, Day of War, Covenant of War, Song of War, and very soon, in fact, in the next couple of months, we're going to put out Fires of War, and then at the end of the year, Twilight of War. All 5 books finally released. The entire Line of War series this year, 2026. Man, did you ever think that was going to happen?
No. No. Dead on the field. It was, because I told you guys it's been about 20 years that I've worked on this in some form or fashion. And it was truly dead on the field. You guys came along, resuscitated it, got me back in the fight, and we've been finishing it. And just this past December, I typed the end, not literally, but figuratively typed the end on the end of the 5th book.
Nice.
And it's draft. And we'd set that internal deadline before the end of the year. We're going to get the sucker done. And we reached it. And so there's still a little bit of love and polish to put on both of them that I'm doing right now, but they are both done. If I died right now, those books could go to market and people would know what the heck happens in them. So
you have told us that countless times now in email and then over phone. Is that your plan? Like, are you gonna?
You never know what the Lord is planning. Like, what did Jesus say? Your life may be demanded of you this very night. So, it was important from just a redemption arc for me and a legacy project. I didn't want to go to the grave with that unfinished, and it was important to just personally for me to get there. But I do think there's something in that series of books that has resonated with guys, and it especially when you get into the last 2, as David and the mighty men start to age, they wrestle with different types of battles. They have basically subdued their enemies under their feet. They no longer have Philistines who are threatening them. They no longer have any of these surrounding empires. Everyone is towing the line big time. In fact, their enemies are saying, please let us build a palace for you so you don't attack us. It's pretty successful on the battlefield, but man, it's that internal character finishing well stuff that is so acute at the end of David's life. And I think I've said this before, but the first 3 books, I was able to write those at that point in my life because I think a younger man can write that side of David's life. You're still kind of in your upward climb. You're achieving and you're fighting hard and you're seeing setbacks, but you're also getting victories and you feel like you have your whole life ahead of you.
Yeah.
It's in book 4, which is the David and Bathsheba stuff. And then book 5, as they start to get old and there's wars of succession going on. And I thought, man, really only an older guy can tell this. And so I think I literally had to age like whiskey in the oak barrel. I had to actually get older and endure more of life and find the right group of people to come alongside because the subject matter was really rich. And anyway, all that to say is that if you're familiar with these books at all, it's just a story of King David's warriors known as the mighty men. You read about them in 2 Samuel 23 and 1 Chronicles 11. And it's just David is the backbone of the story, but he's not really the main character. He's the character that they all interact with. And so we just follow them through the battlefields and as they all age and become men and struggle and triumph and all that. So anyway, all that to say is I reached the end of that, hit the end in December and thought, well, what's next? And the podcast idea was kind of probably in my head around the same times you guys had it. And I was thinking this would be what I want to do next is just do kind of an epic biographical narrative of David from start to finish from a nonfiction standpoint. What does the Bible actually say? My Line of War series is very fictionalized. I take the text, but I wanted to create a nonfiction, like biography approach to this thing. And the podcast format seemed like the right way to do it. So,
Yeah.
you know.
So, all right. So jumping into this right now, it's already live. We've got a 2-minute trailer. We've got a 20-minute prologue, and then we've got episode 1, right? The Corridor of Empires. That's what's available right now. I mean, you're in studio today recording episode 2. Yep. This week, we're going to get 2, 3, 4, something like that, and try to get another 3 or 4 out of you in the next week or so. That's actively going on right now. So this thing is in production, right? Like we're getting it right hot off the press. As it comes off, we're going to produce it and put it out as quick as we can. Can you walk us through the prologue and then the first episode, and just kind of let people hear your thoughts behind those 2 episodes? Give a taste for what they're getting into if they buy into this whole series, because it really is something that I know I played it for my kids. The trailer came on, they listened to it, and they were like, "What's next, Dad?" We listened to the prologue. They wanted to hear episode 1, and then they were wanting more, and we had nothing to give them.
Right on.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, hopefully we'll be able to release just, in a regular fashion, the whole, it might take a long time to get through it all, but the prelude, I should say, it's labeled prelude in the feed, is I stepped back and thought to myself, what about this story makes it compelling? What can we do to just get people sucked into this world? And for a while there, I was a tour leader in Israel, and I remember being on the sites that all this takes place. And there's nothing like that from an evocative level to stand in a location that you think something I've been reading in the Bible actually happened in this very place. Yeah. It just pulls you right in. So let's start there. And we open with a journey to the Valley of Elah and what it looks like today.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of give a detailed description of there's a gas station here. There's a field over there that they have farming going on. And there's just not much there to commemorate what happened here. And if you didn't know where you were, there's no sign telling that to you. And so it just kind of pulling the listener in that way. And the idea is just to narrate the world of David and kind of set that stage. And then we get into episode 1, which is called The Corridor of Empires. And what I wanted to do with that was, I remember taking a class in seminary years and years ago where it was an introduction to the Old Testament, but the guy spent the first few lectures just talking about the geography and geopolitical situation of the time. Yeah. And I had never, growing up, reading the Bible, being a pastor's kid, I mean, I thought I knew this, like what the Bible said, but the way he broke down the land itself and why that mattered, and the way that he described why was this patch of earth being so fought over? Why was it so hotly contested? Well, it's because you have Egypt in the south, and you have the Syrians, you have all these other empires, and the only way they can get to each other is this narrow little strip of land between ocean and desert. And so whoever controls that is like controlling a bridge. You can charge a toll across that bridge. And so God chooses this tiny little speck of land to start enacting his plan. And that's what we get in the Bible, is what's going on here. Itty bitty little Israel, So I thought, okay, the reader of the Bible would benefit from knowing and understanding what the land is, why it mattered, and what was going on at the time that David enters the story. So we just kind of, do a drive around the nation and describe it. And then the episode I've been working on today is episode 2. It's A Chosen People. It's just the history of what happens in the Old Testament from creation until the time of David. Just as a little refresher for people to go. Because again, I think
set the scene.
Yeah, people know what happens, but they know it in fragments, right? So here's the narrative from here to here, so that when we start getting into Samuel and Saul and all of that, people have a running start to kind of have in their head the consistency needed. So,
okay, yeah, I mean, just to interject, I think that 2 points. One, I think it's yes, amen. People are really quick to read the Bible at face value without getting transported into the place, the sights, the sounds, the smells, like what was really going on there. I remember teaching through 1 Corinthians for the better part of a year in a Bible study, and beginning with getting into Corinth, like actually, what was it like? What would it have been like to walk down the street and see temple prostitution and the smell of meat being sacrificed to pagan gods, and then trying to be a Christian? Then you start to see, wow, okay, I see why so many of them were dropping like flies to the the luster of the world around them, because like that was the world they were inhabiting. And so the New Testament's hard enough to get into that world, but then the Old Testament is even more difficult because we're kind of Greek in the way we live, but we're not that ancient Israelite at all. And so I thought that was really cool the way that you did that. And I think it's really helpful for people who want to know just more about the scriptures in general, who want to go beyond something like the Line of War book series, which is a great, I mean, it's a whole different thing. It is a biblical study, I believe, added with color added to it. But at the same time, I think it will lead people to wanting to know more about the scriptures. Wow. So the Bible, like this kind of stuff really happened in the Bible. Yeah. If you just read it plainly and you don't think too much, it just kind of reads like a boring story. But also I think, getting into the life of David is critical for unlocking a lot for men, the Old Testament. I think David is like a key. Obviously, Jesus is the key to the Old Testament. We know. Yeah. Like I get that. But in terms of for the modern man, I think David is like a key to understanding the reality, the vicious nature of what happened in the Old Testament, the reality of why we needed Christ, so much of the way things were when you get to the New Testament, so much of the failings we see in men today, the victories that men have today, all of that is wrapped up in David, and it really helps, I think, set men on a trajectory to be whole Bible men. I know you mentioned that in the episode, like, you know, dating somebody, you want to know about their life before you met, the moment you met them, right? Like it doesn't all matter what happened when it got to you, right? You want to know about them, and you want to see the history of God's people, of why the Messiah was a big deal, why all of these things happened, what, like this real history. And so I think it's super helpful and honestly just fun to listen to, but to bring guys into that world in order to make them, you know, whole Bible Christian men.
Yeah, how do you do a Bible study that is, I designed it to be academic in the way that it's structured, but story driven, right? How do you help them understand that this is all a narrative? In today's episode, the episode 2, I'm framing it like a campfire story. Before there was a printed written Bible that you could just pick up and read, right? This was told by fathers to their sons and daughters around hearth, around a campfire in the woods. They said, let me tell you of the great deeds of our God. Let me tell you about the Red Sea party. So think about how when you talk to your kids, let me tell you this amazing thing that happened this one time. And you just kind of, you stutter through it and you stumble over it, but you get there, right? You're trying to wrap their minds around something so incredible that you can't even articulate it very well. That's how the word was passed along for a very long period of time. And until the exile, right, in the Babylonian exile, when they could start really consolidating these writings and passages together to say, okay, now sit down and read this scroll, right? So I think this is designed to be something like a return to those campfire days where now that you have the word of God, so please read the Bible and not listen to our podcast, number one, right? If you have to choose between the two, right? Yeah. But if you don't have to choose between the two, the idea is that I know it's daunting to pick your Bible up and look at the Old Testament, and it's just this brick of paper. You think, where even is everything? I mean, I know about Abraham and I know about this Tower of Babel, and but where do I even find that stuff? And it's so tempting to just flip to the New Testament because, instructions for living. Jesus has come. The letters of Paul are really great because they're very practical. They're like, you're an idiot, you're a knucklehead, do better here. Oh, you guys are awesome. I mean, it's a lot of very clear things in there, right? There's mystery, but there's also a lot of clarity that we don't get as far as how should we then live. And in the Old Testament, what you're missing out on if you don't spend time there are those nuances about the character of God. Like Jesus doesn't show up with a sword in his hand. The sword is his words as he's talking. He says things that are sharp and stab. David literally stabbed people. I mean, so as the forerunner of Jesus, you're seeing David as almost this giant metaphor of God vanquishing evil and subduing their enemies on all sides so that there is a safe haven for his people to grow. And I've always been fascinated by that part of David's character where we can get there on Sunday morning in modern America. We get there with a worship song comes up and we know, okay, that's a psalm that was written by David, the sweet psalmist of Israel. And he was 100% those things. He was also the most dangerous, terrifying man that walked the earth at that time. He struck fear in the hearts of their enemies, and he was very savage. I mean, that's what we're going to explore as we go along in the podcast, is just, this is not a fellow you wanted to get on the wrong side of. And so I think that full dimensional look at him as a man who's hunting God, that's the phrase, he was a man after God's heart. A better way to render that, he was a man who hunted God's heart. He was searching for God's heart at all times. He was chasing him. So how do we get this, and apply that from the Old Testament kind of world into now the spirit that was on David is in all of us on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, there's a lot of rabbit holes.
And most of us don't look like a fraction of David, you know?
Yeah.
We're so docile and lulled to sleep. That's why I think so many men resonate with this story in the books. And it's awesome that the podcast, I just feel like it's another thing to kind of feed on, but so much of it is in story and the dialogue that you made between the guys. Like, that's what, if guys do have friends and brothers, like, we love that. And to know that that's not wrong. And how do I do that? And how do iron sharpens iron? Like, how do we apply these scriptures? Like you said, the New Testament is very applicable, right? But like, there's so much in a story. And he grabbed 5 stones. Why not 1 stone? And like, you start just like getting in the weeds of all this. And you're like, my gosh, these guys were just next level caliber. But it was just like you said, because he sought after God.
Yeah.
Like,
What do you think it is? And gentlemen, feel free to chime in. You went through seminary, you were a chaplain in the military, right? Your father was a pastor. Your father had a huge impact on especially men, right? What value really does storytelling play in all of that when it comes to shaping and inspiring and encouraging the hearts of men? I mean, that's a tagline that we use a lot around Kavod. It's an imprint on your book, right? For the hearts of men. It's something that we grab from David and his story. You can clearly see that he's provoked that the heart of man has kind of been lost, right? They're timid when it comes to slaying the giants, especially Goliath in that early story. And so what is it about storytelling that provokes courage and strength and passion and faith in so many of us? Because storytelling above so many other things, above, seminary classes where you just kind of sit there and you read on theology or a systematic theology. I mean, there's many ways to study, but storytelling stands above in so many ways.
Justin and I had a conversation about this the other day where we're saying we're almost at a saturation point, I think, where because of new printing technologies and the number of publishers and the number of just the access to information people can do. There's a lot of books out there and a lot of theological treatises being written. I mean, it's just exponentially grown, right?
Sure.
Think about it's just exploded. So there's really no original thought you can kind of have anymore and put into a book.
That hasn't been
I
pinned
say
down.
that affectionately. Now, the difference is if you're a good writer, you can shape it in certain ways that get people to think that that's the calling. But you can detect out there men in the church that are readers or do care about these things. There's that saturation point. And Jess and I were talking about how seems like there's going to be a resurgence of storytelling and fiction as a way to begin probing the other deep aspects of God that have been dormant for a while.
Yeah.
That book, The Brothers Karamazov, I've seen that showing up a lot more. It's an old Russian literature, very long, but it's very dense, very theological, fascinating glimpse at what the effect of sin corroding a person. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. The Narnia books from C.S. Lewis are kind of timeless in that way. When literature and fiction becomes part of what we look at, there's ways to talk about messages and themes and ideas that you kind of sneak into people's heads that way. So they're drawn to the story. The story is captivating, but it's just all that Jesus did this all the time. He would tell a parable because that in sequential order, they could see and identify something that they recognized in their own life. And they'd say, okay, yeah, I knew a guy who sowed a field that way. And some of the seed went on rock and some of the seed went on soil. I mean, he's giving them a narrative to then insert themselves into. Part of why people love the great movies and the great books is because they imagine themselves as that character. Like, who doesn't want to be Maximus taking his helmet off and turn around and say, it's about to be on? You have that I think men have that yearning. John Eldridge, he wrote about that well all those years ago with that.
Wild at Heart.
Yeah, Wild at Heart, where all those men just simply want to be part of a grand narrative and story. And so that's a long way of answering the question. I think when men, what causes that dormant effect is they don't feel like they're part of anything great. They just wake up each day and they slug it out. I got to make more money. I got to compete with everybody else. I've got to get nitpicked by this person. And I got to figure out how to be nice to my wife, and my kids are nagging me. None of that feels grand. And it's like we're all men in the Elah Valley right before David shows up, where you're just seeing a taunt and a curse fly at you every day from this army that's way bigger than you are. They're dominating the entire world. You guys are hopeless, and you're standing there going, it's just a matter of time before we're slaves.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. Yeah. And then one guy shows up and is like, what is going on here? Why is no one killing him?
Yeah.
So I think that we're just at that point with men, it feels like, where especially men of the church, where everyone is in that gray twilight of existing, and they need that spark of encouragement to say, you are part of a grand narrative, and you're about to enter the scene here.
Yeah, we were having that conversation the other day, and my mind has been being kind of reformed, because whenever I was a younger man, I didn't really care about the things of God. I professed to be a Christian, but then when the Lord got a hold of me, brought me back to himself, and I started walking with him, I immediately went to that systematic theology type of mindset. Yep. When you begin that journey into reformational theology and all of that, like becoming a Calvinist, you immediately go to, the Bible as
doctrine.
What is the basic instructions before leaving earth? Isn't that the acronym for Bible? Which I get it. I understand what they're getting at. But when we look at the Bible as, well, it's a list of do's and don'ts so that you can be pleasing to God. That's very little of it. That's very little of it. The bulk of it is narrative. Yeah. The bulk of it is narrative. And I think for me, if I could sit down with a man and he has the Spirit of God in him, truly, I think about 3 times of having breakfast together, he'd pretty much have what to do and what not to do. As soon as the Spirit of God is in you, immediately, in almost every situation, you do know what to do. You just don't have the strength to choose the right thing yet, right? You don't have the reps in to do the right thing. Yeah.
The wisdom.
Most men, you don't have the wisdom, but most men, when there's something that clicks,
conviction,
when you know, all right, that's wrong, that's right. I still want what's wrong, but I know what's right. Let me choose the thing that's right, even though I want what's wrong. Like, men get that immediately. But if that is the pattern, if that's all you're being taught for all of your Christian life is do's and don'ts, you're actually missing the fact that the people of God were always formed through story. The Bible is a story. Like, yes, we write ourselves into it. God writes us into it by means of being his people. But we assume that the primary way people are formed is through do's and don'ts. But in reality, clearly, we're formed by walking through a story and seeing how the truths of a world made by God and ruled by God actually play out. That's all a good story is pretend that world is a world that God made, and now just tell a story, right? Like, that forms people differently than just telling them do's and don'ts, because you can get through that very quickly, but it's hard to mature by just consuming facts. No one matures by consuming facts. They mature by walking through things. You can only mature by living, by going out and living. And so many men, I think, in the church, either one, are totally ignorant of everything, right? They're just trying to live, or they're just trying to do what they want secretly while hoping they make it to heaven in the end. But there's a lot of men in the church who think that they're real men because of their doctrinal certitude and because of their ability to neatly align doctrines and understand the things about the Bible. And that doesn't make a man, right? Wisdom is what makes a man. Righteousness is what makes a man. And the Bible seems to prescribe the stories of what God has done in the world as the means of producing righteous people. The stones of remembrance that were left on the other side of the Jordan didn't have inscribed on them, don't go back to Egypt, right? Here's what you do and here's what you don't do. They were just sat there so that when the people walked by, you would tell your sons when they asked, here's what happened here. Not, don't go back to Egypt and desire what's over there, right? That's not the way that God seems to want to form people. And I think our culture, again, we're just seeing that it doesn't really work to just constantly berate men and women,
Do's
but
and
men,
don'ts.
we're
Yeah.
men with do's and don'ts. Rather, they need to be shaped. You're not going to find a list of doctrinal statements from C.S. Lewis. But if you read Narnia, that is dripping with truths about who God is and how you should live in light of him.
Story frames it in a way. If you think about your past, mistakes you may have made in your past. If you view your life as a story, as a narrative, then what your past is something that did occur, but it now makes more sense as being in the past. It's like the first part of a book when the tension and stuff is going on. By the time you get to the end, you don't live actively in what happened in the earlier part of the book. You know it's there. It's in your psyche. It's in your subconscious. And now you're moving forward to go, what happens next? What happens next? I think that where men have lost their way, and we're all among them, myself as well, we'll look backwards and go, oh man, look at all of what I did back there. And they just kind of camp out in that spot. And the Lord's saying, no, it sounds kind of hokey, but turn the page here. Another thing is going to occur. Because if you woke up this morning, there was a reason for that. If you died, then that was the end of your life. Like that was your story. But you woke up this morning. And so, okay, well, what does today have that is one step farther down that narrative? And again, the whole idea of narrative and story becoming more important when it comes to teaching and learning. Justin, you nailed it. It's the Bible is laid out that way for that purpose, because you can see God existing in time, or putting things into time that unfolds in sequential order. And that just, for whatever reason, that opens up conversations that would not normally be there. So
There's one of my favorite movies, Braveheart. There's a scene in there where Wallace is trying to provoke the Bruce to get involved. He's kind of being passive and not willing to get involved and fight for his people. And Wallace is speaking with him, right? He's provoking him. And he says, men don't follow titles, they follow courage. And if you would just lead your people, they would follow. And then he says, I would follow. And that thought, men don't follow titles, they follow courage. And I think story has a way of teaching those emotions, courage, that kind of honor, that kind of virtue. It puts that on display where men and even boys can grab hold of it. Like it gives them something they can see, right? We were just yesterday, my family, it's spring break and we took the day. So we ran up and we hiked part of the trail that goes up to Mount LeConte. You go up to Alum's Cave, which is it's maybe 2 hours, just shy of 2 hours to get there. Well, on the way back, here I am, and I have there's 4 young boys that are with me. And it didn't take long, and they had their shirts off, because we're on a trail. We're out in the middle of the woods. They're having a good time, shirts off. They're running around the woods with sticks, and they're chasing the dog down the hill. And all of a sudden, they're taking on, this hike is no longer a hike. It's an adventure that they're on. And when they get to a bridge, we're not crossing a bridge. We're climbing on the hand railing outside, and there's a 10-foot drop. And if we fall, we could die. They want to experience life that way, right? And I think storytelling taps in and gives approval to live in that way. And
it's a quest. Yeah.
Men need that.
Yeah, you live in a quest. And that's why things like The Lord of the Rings and those great tales are in many ways a quest narrative, because there has to be an objective. We have to get this ring to the cracks of Mount Doom. It's a simple task, right?
Yes.
It's very simple, but the execution's more complicated. And so men, I think, don't have an idea of what's the ring that I even have. I'm just existing right now.
So what do you think that is? I mean, if a man came to you and said, what's the quest to my life?
Man, you have X number of days alive on this earth that God has set you here for. And he has specific things he wants you to accomplish. You don't get to know what those things are. You just don't. Sometimes you'll get to look back and go, oh, that was why I was there. But usually it's just, what is the phrase, the next right thing is a great phrase. Because what is the next right thing? Elizabeth Elliot wrote about that. What is today? What's the next right thing I can think to do that is in pursuit of the quest God has given me? Listen, it's hard because we have crazy times of distraction and in chaos. The world at large seems like so big and daunting, but God's not calling you to that. He's saying, I have a specific journey for you. I created you to do this one thing. Here's the other thing that I would say, Casey, is that whatever you do, whoever's listening to this, whatever kind of job you have, vocation, whatever kind of husband you may be, anything, you are the only man in the world that can do that thing. Mm-hmm. And you know why you know that? Because God placed you right there. Yeah. If another man could do it, he would have placed another man right there. Mm-hmm. So it's not glamorous. It may not be big, but right now, the only man in the world that can run this gym and be married to Lydia is this guy right here. He's the only man in the world, right? So when you start to see your life that way and realize the confidence that can give you in what you do and the work of your hands and the fathering of your children and the husbanding of your wife and the engagement in the community, you have a lane, or Bible calls them lot lines. What are the lot lines that you have? Like, I am God's man right here. I'm the only one that can do it.
And being able to grab that from the story. I mean, zooming in specifically to David, to put yourself in that scenario of him as a young man killing a giant when there was an army there and no one was moving. But like, what compelled him to do that? You in your life, you have giants. You have things you're trying to figure out. You feel immensely inadequate to do. And there's people on the field next to you that are more qualified. Weren't they doing it? Mm-hmm. But like, what provoked David to move there? And then David with Bathsheba, he messed up. Why did he mess up? What areas in my life am I leading to compromise like this? And you can just put yourself in these scenarios, but to see David's like, one thing that I would desire is to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So it's like, okay, this man that succeeded and was incredible on the battlefield, but like worship God and wasn't embarrassed to rip off his clothes and dance before the ark. Like they start to teach you principles and ideas of like things like I should emulate that. I should try to do these things. He desired God more than anything. God created me a clean heart. Like, I'm sorry. I want you. You're everything. Forgive me, restore. And then Jesus is called the Son of David. Like, so you start to just see all these things and you can pull lessons from them and put yourself in there, just like how you were saying. So the book series, and I'm super excited for the podcast. It was clutch for me whenever I was probably 20 at the time, because I knew God, I love God, but like, I didn't know really what else to do with it like that. So when I saw this and I saw that these men not only did these incredible feats, but then you started the smack talk in it and the competition and then pushing each other, and it made them better. And the three led new leaders up. And I was like, now this I can buy into. Like, this sounds sweet. And to understand, like, that's biblical. Like, that's what God wants. That's how we're supposed to be. We're brothers and we're fighting back darkness and we're giving God honor. And I'm like, all right, I get this. And this is easy to teach and this is easy to communicate because that's how God's wired men. And then you really insert yourself into that story and you grab the lessons. That's why, like you said, it was told in a story, because you can see the principles. Like the small things of like David grabbing 5 stones. I never would have picked up on that. Mm-hmm. And you explain why. And then to understand the feats that his men went to do because of who they were led by. Yeah. But who led David was God. And like, we have access to that and he's inside of us. It's just like your mind is blown to like, what can I do here?
There's no wasted comma or period in the Bible, right? It's Everything's crazy. In there on purpose. And I think that's why the doorway to David is never the doorway of the psalmist. That can kind of deceive us a little bit because it's so important. It's desperately important to have.
Sure. Look
at this gift of the Psalms. The doorway to understanding his character, though, is I think through the men around him and how he was a war leader. You have to just, if you depart from that too far when you're trying to read about David or preach on David, whatever you're doing, you're going to start to drift away from, I think, the core of why God had him on the earth. Like, God tells him, you were a man of war and shed much violence. Yep. Your son will be a man of peace and he will build my temple. So right there at the capstone of David's life, we're told God had you here to be a warrior. That's why you're here. So then you backtrack and go, oh, now his story makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
So all the tales of the mighty men and things like what a story that just haunts me, and I talk about it every time it ever comes up in David, is when he they're fighting and they're surrounded, and he just thinks about this well outside of Bethlehem he used to drink from as a boy. And his men just hear him musing aloud about that. Like, oh man, that was good water. Those were good days. It doesn't take much to imagine the scenario they're probably in, where there's drought, there's something going on, they're surrounded, outnumbered, it's desperate. And until you understand this from the heart of a warrior, you don't understand why it's such a special story. These men are willing to die to fight through ranks of the enemy.
Yeah.
Get this pouch of water, and they bring it back to him. And the worst thing he can do is drink that water. It's the worst. Isn't that incredible? It's the worst thing he can do. Is like
the thing he wants to do.
They all know it. They all know it.
And it's like, hey, here's this water. Now, this is what we did. Now you know what to do. You know what to do. And it's like, and they're all just thirsty and it's hot. And he just dumps it out before the Lord. And he basically says that I am not worthy of this offering. Only one is worthy. And he pours out what's called a drink offering. And remember, people forget that this land is desert land. So water itself is more valuable than gold, depending on where you are. Yeah. So to just pour out water on the ground is a colossal waste and a stupid thing to do. But unless you believe that God is your sustainer, God is your provider, and God is more important than your thirst. Yeah. And so I guess it's those little, again, how can you understand that story except for through the lens of warriors? It's in there. These are not things that I just made up, right? That the beauty of, I think if a man just reads the story of David and he sees these things, it then becomes the Maximus, the William Wallace. That's what's so desperately important. It's not just louting around the palace chasing Bathsheba. It's a whole narrative of decades that are about one hard thing after another that he and his men overcome,
Yeah, that's the same thing with I think what we do in the church whenever we just sanitize the stuff that's more difficult to explain or to talk about or to rationalize with, like you mentioned in, I think, the beginning of the second episode, or technically the first episode, not the prelude, where, if I say David and you fill in, you're probably going to say Goliath or Bathsheba, and then Goliath or Bathsheba second, and then you don't really know who else to talk about. But I think we do the same thing with Jesus, where, like, gentle and lowly, meek and mild, as the King James said, is pretty much all we have. So flipping tables and then revelation, we're like, I don't really know what to do with that. Like, I'm not, don't throw the bread to the dogs, he tells that woman. Or you're a twice made son of hell and your whitewashed tombs. And like all of these things that Jesus does, and then coming back in Revelation is just next level. But like we get so one-sided, and we take the things that we make them out to be who we want them to be. And I think that's the same thing with David. When you talk about, he's the guy that wrote the Psalms, and he's the guy that killed Goliath. Yeah. He's also the guy that cut off his head, kept the head long enough to bury it somewhere, right? He's also the guy that killed thousands and thousands and thousands of enemies. He's also the same guy that did take a handicapped son of Jonathan and bring him into his house and make sure that he ate at his table all the days of his life. That's probably my favorite David vignette of all of them, right? That's one of the most Christ-like ones, in my opinion. But like we take him, we make things one-sided in order to fit our own lives. Like we want to be the nice guys. We don't want to be the guys that have to get our hands dirty. We don't want to see the full picture of the scriptures. We don't want to, like my kids asking me when we're reading, well, who was going to kill Eli's sons? We just started reading through 1 Samuel because my kids are super into David right now. That new David movie that came out, the animated one, it's actually pretty good. Shout out. The kids like it a lot. They're like, well, who's going to kill Eli's sons? And I'm like, God is. And they said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I'm like, God's going to kill them. He said he was going to kill them. And they're just like, okay, I'm not really sure what to do with that. They don't know how to process that. But seeing the full picture, and like you said, not just going, oh, David's that guy that cried a lot, and we wrote down his whole personal journal and called it the Psalms. Like, no, this is a full Lord guy, and taking that and saying, okay, let's see the whole Christ. Also, because the Christ of Psalm 23, the good shepherd, is also I'll put all my enemies under my footstool. Like he'll tread the winepress of the wrath of God, all of that. Right. And I think it's just so helpful when we look at the life of David, exactly what you said of actually getting into the narrative and seeing him as a man, right?
Yeah.
The victories and the failures. If you're going to tell, if you're going to tell your kids, if you're going to teach your kids a lesson through your own failures, is what you say simply, in that moment, I transgressed commandment number 8? Or do you say, well, here's what happened. I did this, and then I did this, and then I thought that, and then I failed here, and then God redeemed it there. Like that's storytelling, right? We don't talk about our own lives through lists of do's and don'ts. We talk about them as a story.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And it's so cool to see that in someone as big as David, who's really going through a resurgence right now in culture. That's why I think this is so timely. David's a big deal right now.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting timing. A lot of David projects popping up out there. We get to be one of them. Pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, let's begin to wrap this up. What can people expect? I mean, right now, I think what is projected, and you can clean this up and help me out here. We're hoping to do one season kind of per or around the stories of the Line of War series. So a series 1 around kind of the background and Day of War, series 2 around the theme and thoughts of Covenant of War. Is that where you're wanting to go with this?
Yeah. So think of it this way. Over 20 years of work on this project for the novels, I compiled hordes of research and had tons of experience talking with various, all these things. So I'm just taking all of that work and putting it into the podcast and basically coming out and saying, let's interview. It's a combination of interviews. There'll be people that I talk to that are interview about a certain subject matter, or some of you guys will be showing up in there. I mean, episodes will be narration. Like here's the next phase of his life. And then sometimes we'll slow way down because there's really dense text and we'll unpack it. So this first season, it's probably going to take a while to even get to David showing up because we have to go through Samuel and Saul and all of that. Sure. We have to go through it. Whereas in Day of War, the first book in the Line of War series, it opens with the David and Goliath, and then it just skips ahead 20 something years. And we never go back there again until in flashback. Right. So I can't do the same thing with this. There has to be that very methodical, long form layout. Ideally, if God blesses this and lets me finish it, it could be a lengthy project. I could see this going on dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of episodes because there's a lot of his life that we cover and the themes are just so powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
I was talking with Travis the other day about, the nature of how men joke and talk to each other. That's an entire episode. Yeah. So we're just I decided that we're going to take our time and do it. And if the audience will be with me on it, we'll try to cover the plot of the first novel where it's all the way through David and they rescue the families from, being captured by the Amalekites. We'll try to get there in this first stretch, but I don't want to race through the stuff that's so deep. Like this third episode that I'm recording later today, it's just called The Song of Hannah. And Hannah, the barren woman who gives birth to Samuel, the prophet Samuel. This is all decades and decades before David even exists. Yeah. I was like, I can't whip past this. I mean, this is a barren woman crying out to God and God saying, okay, I will begin my plan of redemption with you. It's a completely fascinating episode. So that way, I think by the time David finally shows up, if we did the job right, there will be an anticipation and an eagerness because people will have a full head of knowledge about what's been leading into it.
So this is not just a boring lecture.
Right.
Okay. You're
hopefully not.
You're drawing them into
my wife will let me know if it's boring.
There you go. That's good. And you're committed to do all of these episodes. Is it under 37 minutes?
Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about that coming up is David had 37 mighty men. So I decided that no amount of talking I can do is cooler than any of them. So a minute per mighty man is the limit. I had a podcast I used to do with a buddy of mine. We always had that rule. All right, 37 minutes and no more because of 37 mighty men. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, and you're going to bring in some guests.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the bulk of this, 2/3 of this, is going to be you solo narrating a story.
Yep.
Correct. Mm-hmm. No visuals. We want this just to be a narration. Mm-hmm. We want you to hear the story and see it in your head play out. Right.
Right. We live in a saturated time of video. Again, everything is so video. We're on video right now, and that's all fine. But to me, particularly for this, I guess what I'm trying to do is help guys. It's 4 men. Ladies, you're welcome to listen, but it's just 4 men. Just know that it's 4 men. To begin using that part of their brains and their minds and their hearts that is imagination based, and not just feed me more visual stimuli, but actually crack open and start flexing that muscle that's really atrophied in the culture, attention spans and things like that. And so it'll be a little work, but I hope the reward is worth it. And so we're going to do, there will be an episode of narration, and then another one, and then I'll get to a certain point where now it's time to insert an episode that is an interview with an interesting person that might have something to say about this phase of David's life or what we're looking at in the world right now. Right. Yep. And it'll be kind of part like what Joe Rogan does and those guys where they just talk to a guest, and then that episode will get thrown in there, and then we'll go back to narration for a while and then another guest. And so hopefully it's more of a variety program than it is just a history lecture. Yeah. They get more of that in there.
Right on. All right. Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Well, how do we want to wrap this up? Well, let's do this. Brand new Line of War shirt, right? Yep. This one will hit the website. You
got
can
the
go find those.
Kopesh blade on it right there. Pretty cool.
What do you call it?
Kopesh blade. It's like an Egyptian root. They would take this sword right here. See, it's got like a curve on it. They had to have a tool that was able to harvest grain in their field and also be able to stab people with. So a Kopesh blade was designed with that in mind. The Egyptians had it as an actual weapon, and the Hebrews kind of co-opted it, sort of the Philistines. This idea that you can
same thing as a sickle sword.
Yeah, it's like a sickle sword. Yeah, it's not specifically that. This is in that same. Okay, here, one more geek out minute.
Yeah.
So the idea of David in the early days, we don't get much in the Bible about him at all, about what comprised the weaponry and the tactics and that sort of thing. So all we can do is guess. But because of where they were on this land bridge between empires, there would have been a lot of knowledge going back and forth from Egypt to Syria and back and forth all the time. And you would have had variations on armies and movements and weaponry that would have traveled along, right? So think of that the Tritus that's just found on the side of a road. You'd pick that up and go, oh, I can repurpose this and tweak with the idea. And so I like the idea of using a Kopesh blade for a lot of the symbolism in the story, because there's a great deal of Egyptian influence that is still there in the land. So anything about military tactics and standing armies, that's who they would have been copying, because they were close by, but they were also very effective. So the idea of the Egyptian influence kind of coming into their army, I always thought was a pretty cool way. By the time they get later in life, he stands up a full army. And so they probably had their own weapons and tactics that they developed. But in the early days, it would have been, hey, that guy's dead, grab his weapon.
Hijack.
Yeah.
All right. So Line of War podcast, it is out now, available episodes. I mean, you could say 1 and 2, the prologue, and then episode 1. And we're committed to release one of these. I think we're going with every Thursday.
Yep, that's the goal.
So, in fact, we got to get on it and get one out today. But that's the goal. Put one out every week and carry this on. This is going to be a project that we do hopefully for more than just one season, right? Let it go for a while and let it feed the hearts of men. I mean, that's what we're after with these books, with this podcast, with everything else that we're doing. We want to inspire men, provoke them to walk, to run, to live, to be faithful to God, to live passionately in whatever field that God has called them to serve in, right? This should be the kind of thing. I mean, gentlemen, honestly, if you're in the trades or if you work in a mechanic shop and you take lunch with a group of guys, put on this podcast and listen to it during lunch break.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that you could listen to and it would feed your soul for 20 or 30 minutes. And then you could have a conversation about life and manhood and the things that men do. This is where the story of God belongs, in those real life scenarios, the lives that we all actually live. We don't live in church. We live in those areas throughout the week.
It is designed to be, you talk about it at the gym with your buddies between sets. It's designed to be that kind of thing. So, for sure.
Right on. Amen. Well, thanks for listening.